Flowers can't move, but their pollen still has to reach one very specific target. That tiny landing is the start of pollination, and everything that happens next depends on it. In this video, you'll learn exactly how pollination works, the two main types, and how wind, water, and insects help move pollen where it needs to go. Let's begin with a definition of pollination. Pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther, the pollen-producing part of the stamen, to the stigma, the pollen-receiving surface of pistil. Once you know that, you can sort pollination into two main types. The first type is self-pollination. Self-pollination happens when pollen comes from the same plant, either within one flower or between two flowers on the same plant. That's easiest when a flower has both male and female parts. However, even if a plant has separate male and female flowers, it can still self-pollinate as long as both flowers are on the same plant. The second type works differently. Cross-pollination happens when pollen moves from a flower on one plant to a flower on a different plant of the same species. In other words, the pollen goes to a neighbor, not back to the same plant. But flowers can't move pollen on their own, so pollination depends on agents or helpers that transport pollen from one place to another. One major agent is wind. Wind-blown pollen is often light and powdery, and the stigma may be sticky or feathery, so it can catch pollen as it drifts by. Water can also serve as a carrier. In some aquatic plants, water can carry pollen. The idea is the same. Pollen travels until it contacts a stigma and sticks. Still, cross-pollination can be tricky when plants are far apart. Wind and water don't always deliver pollen reliably. That's where animals, especially insects, come in. Insects like bees, butterflies, and moths visit flowers for nectar, a sugary food made near the base of the flower. To attract them, flowers use bright petals and fragrance like a clear "come visit" signal. When an insect lands to drink nectar, its body brushes the anthers. Pollen grains stick to the insect, often because the insect is a little fuzzy and the pollen often is slightly sticky. Then, when the insect flies to another flower of the same species, some pollen rubs off onto the stigma. That's cross-pollination. The insect acts like a moving pollen shuttle. For cross-pollination to work, pollen has to reach the right kind of flower, the same species. Luckily, many pollinators tend to visit flowers that provide the best nectar, so they keep visiting similar flowers, which boosts the chances of success. So far, we've covered what pollination is, the difference between self and cross-pollination, and the main agents that move pollen around. Ready to lock it in? Tap the link for study guides and flashcards on this topic, so you can keep learning without missing a beat. Now let's apply this to plants. A plant whose flower structures place anthers and stigma close together may self-pollinate more easily, but plants spaced farther apart often benefit from insect visitors. For example, take a tomato plant. Its flowers have male and female parts close together, so self-pollination can happen within the flower. Even so, insect visits can still help by shaking loose pollen and increasing the chance that pollen reaches the stigma. Now compare that to an apple orchard. Trees can be spaced out, so cross-pollination becomes more important. Bees traveling tree to tree can move pollen much more reliably than random wind gusts. That's why growers often bring in beehives, so pollen transfer is consistent during the flowering season. Here's an important twist. Some plants are self-incompatible, meaning their own pollen won't work on their own stigma. They need pollen from a different plant of the same species to reproduce successfully. And that leads us to an important clarification. Pollination is only the transfer of pollen to the stigma. Fertilization happens later, after the pollen delivers sperm cells to an ovule inside the ovary. So how does insect pollination actually work? You can think of it in 4 moves. First, the flower attracts a pollinator with color, scent, and nectar. Next, the pollinator picks up pollen from the anthers. Then it travels to another flower of the same species. Finally, some pollen is deposited onto the stigma. Pollination complete. To recap, pollination is pollen moving from the anther to stigma. Self-pollination stays within one plant, while cross-pollination moves between different plants of the same species. Wind, water, and especially insects can act as delivery agents, often making cross-pollination much more reliable. Now that you've watched the video, let's see how much you remember. Head to the link in the description where you'll find Quizlet content made just for you.